Hello again and welcome to Pick Yourself, the podcast that helps you build a meaningful electronic music career. If your goal is to create and release outstanding music on respected labels, get better bookings and grow a tribe of true fans instead of just social followers, then this show is for you. My name is Philip, thanks for tuning in, and now let's get right into today's episode. Welcome to episode 48 of Pick Yourself. As always, I'm super happy to have you here with me again. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking with me. And in this week's episode, we are talking about how you can craft an electronic press kit, also called EPK, that is highly effective, that increases your chances of getting covered by blogs, by magazines, being found by journalists. And I will share with you some of the tricks that I believe truly make a difference. But before we jump into the topic itself, there is one thing you should definitely check out, and that is a free resource. It's called The 7 Strategies of Highly Successful Electronic Music Artists. You can get it at pickyourselfpodcast.com/free. And this is something like a little PDF guide, takes you like 5 minutes to read, but I believe this can definitely change the outcome of your artist career if you implement the things in there, if you take these strategies seriously. Now, you might be wondering where these strategies are coming from. Well, I'm working with a lot of different people in my mixing and mastering studio, so I specialize in electronic music and I work with all kinds of artists in that genre, from small independent artists to major label artists. And I have simply observed patterns that made a difference, some things that people did and others did not, and they make all the difference, it seems. So it's not only about being massively talented or being massively productive, although that helps, like both of that helps definitely, but the strategies that I have distilled in this PDF guide, they are the things that were in common between all these people, all these successful people. So go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/free and download that little PDF guide. I think it's super valuable and I would love to hear from you if you have implemented these things and if you're seeing success. And by the way, if you are looking to collaborate with others, if you are looking for people that support each other, that help each other grow as artists, we do have a Facebook community of awesome people. You can go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/community and that forwards you to our private Facebook group. And I'm super happy to have these great people in there. I'm also there actively helping people if they have questions. So just go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/community and join us there. I would love to see you. All right, now let's talk about EPKs, electronic press kits, and how to make them stand out. So if you want to craft a highly effective electronic press kit as a musician, as a DJ, you definitely need a strategic approach. So a poorly designed PDF document isn't enough anymore these days. And if your goal is to get featured on influential blogs, on influential magazines, you need an EPK that stands out and gets your message across. Otherwise, people simply won't care about you. And as always, this is my little disclaimer here. If your music sucks, there's no way a super awesome EPK will save you. So I assume that your music is already on point and you simply want to bring it out there to the people. You want to actively promote it in a meaningful way. And if that's the case, if your music is great, then this EPK strategy that I'm sharing with you will help you get the attention you deserve. So in this episode, I am going to share with you 3 key ingredients of a highly effective music EPK, but I'm also telling you what needs to be part of an EPK. So if you don't know what that is, what needs to go into an EPK, don't worry, I will also touch on this. Okay, so what is an EPK for musicians and DJs, and why do you need one? So an electronic press kit is something like a 360-degree overview of who you are, what you're about, and why anyone should care. And it only has one purpose, and this purpose is it must give journalists and bloggers enough reasons and enough material to write about you. And usually, an EPK for musicians is somewhere located on your artist website, but you can also link to it, for example, from your social media profiles. And you don't necessarily need a whole website to host your electronic press kit. So theoretically, you could just get cheap cloud space, for example, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, something like that, and simply upload a zip folder that contains all the materials. Now, this is not the best solution, but I think it is better than having nothing. And as the name electronic press kit implies, it's much more than just an artist bio and some photos. Yeah. So this is really important. People confuse this all the time. They think that an electronic press kit is some PDF file and a couple of photos that are maybe even part of that PDF in the worst case scenario. Yeah, so this is not the same as a press kit. A press kit is much more. It's a digital representation of your artist brand, and it contains much more than just text and music. Okay, so what are the essential ingredients of an electronic press kit for musicians, for DJs? So in real life, this looks more or less like this. It must include music and artwork, first of all. So, for example, an embedded playlist which showcases your most recent or your best releases. And then, of course, you can also include free downloads to that music if you want to, and also high-res images of all single, EP, album artworks that you have. Then the next thing is videos. Yeah, so you have links or maybe embeds to recent video footage if you have any. So this can be official music videos, but it can also be other things like people that have been interviewing you, maybe some footage of a fantastic live show at a big festival that you played or something like that. Maybe a little underground rave that you organized and you have some video footage of that. So stuff that just conveys a bit more emotion than just the music or just the artwork. Then photos. Of course, you need professional looking artist shots that reflect your brand and that are also in line with your style. So, and also with the genre that you're a part of. So if you're playing super dark techno, for example, of course your photo shoot might look a bit different compared to someone who's playing deep house, for example. Then the next big thing is your artist bio. And you should have a short as well as a long version of your artist bio. And you must make sure that it reflects the why as well as the what. And I will explain that in more detail below, but keep that in mind. Your why is probably even more important than the what in this artist bio. Okay, then articles and reviews. So if other magazines or blogs have already written something about you, well, of course you should have some nice quotes of that. You should have some links to the full articles because journalists and bloggers love to read what others wrote about you. And there's a really powerful psychological concept behind that. It's called social proof. Yeah. So if some blog or some magazine has written an absolutely stunning review of your latest release, for example, and you include that in there, it definitely increases your chances that other magazines and blogs will jump on that bandwagon and also leave pretty good reviews. I mean, sometimes you have the oddballs, you have that possibility that someone writes a really, really shitty review just to write something different than everybody else. But yeah, just forget about them. It's not that important. You should still use that opportunity and show people what others think of you. Then the next thing you should include are facts and figures. So if you have any milestones or achievements under your belt, which can be measured in numbers, you can include them, of course. Do it in a humble way though. So I think it's really important to not brag with your numbers too aggressively. And also think twice if your 1,000 Instagram followers are really worth mentioning. Yeah. So when I speak about facts and figures and milestones, you want to pick like some highlights, nothing beyond that. Okay. So for example, one of the artists I've worked with recently, he has published an album and I think within a couple of months he got more than 100,000 streams on Spotify. And this is massive because he was a completely new artist. And I will probably even do an episode on that, like how was this even possible? But yeah, things like that definitely mean something. Yeah, if you're a new artist and you have more than 100,000 streams on Spotify alone in just a couple of months, that definitely is a figure worth mentioning. So if you have something like that, then why not like humble brag about it? Okay, and beyond that, you can also add bonus material, for example, whatever engaging content you can come up with if you have any. And at the end of this blog post, I'm going to give you a few ideas on what that could be. But keep in mind that this bonus content is there to provide an additional layer of depth to your EPK and also showcase a bit more of your personality. So these are the things that you want to achieve with that. And then the last thing that needs to be included, of course, is contact info and links to your social media channels and website or whatever. So I'm sure you would have thought of that anyway, but yeah, it just completes the list here. Then let's talk about how to host an EPK for musicians and DJs. So the best way of doing it is to create a dedicated subpage on your artist website that features all of these things in a well-organized and well-designed way. And this makes it simply easy to update and immediately accessible for journalists and bloggers. Yeah. So simply create a page that is called artistname.com/EPK or your website.com/EPK, and then link to this from your homepage. So you are on your homepage, there should be a direct button that just says EPK or Electronic Press Kit. So you make it as easy as possible for journalists and bloggers to find that material. This is really important. They don't want to dig through your whole website just to find it hidden somewhere at the very bottom of the page. Okay, now that you have an idea of what the key ingredients of an electronic press kit are, let's talk about how you can stand out from all the other artists. Yeah, this is really important. I mean, first of all, not all other artists have an EPK, of course. Yeah, you already stand out by having one. This already puts you in a little bit more professional league. But yeah, still, in this more professional league, there are still hundreds of thousands of artists in the same genre. And if you want to stand out, there are some strategies that will help you. And I'm going to mention 3 factors that I believe make a big difference. The first one is the why is more important than the what. Now, what do I mean by that? So most music producers, DJs, and bands make the same big mistake. They talk about the what, but they forget about the why. Yeah, and what is that? So if you only talk about your style of music, if you only talk about the shows you've played and the recent successes you've had, then you talk mainly about the what. And this is what most people do. And of course, this is important as well. But it also sounds like something you would find in the press kits of many, many other upcoming artists in your genre. It just sounds like a copy and paste thing. And let's say you're a journalist or a blogger and you get hundreds of submissions every day. Then you kind of read the same type of story all over again. And so it's simply not that interesting and distinctive if you only talk about the what. Now, let's think from the perspective of a blogger or a journalist again. Wouldn't you want to find a hidden gem somewhere? Wouldn't you want to share some unique story with your readers? And this is exactly where the why comes into play. So I haven't invented that, of course. There's an incredibly clever guy called Simon Sinek, and he has analyzed many of the most influential brands on earth, for example, stuff like Apple. And he simply found out that many of these companies start with the why instead of the what, always, in everything they do. And this is what makes them so attractive to us. Yeah, so there's an amazing TED Talk, by the way. You should definitely check that out by Simon Sinek. And he encourages us to ask ourselves the following question. Why do you exist and why should anyone care? Yeah, so this sounds very profound and also very simplified. Yeah, but this is the essence why any journalist or blogger should give a damn about you. Yeah, if there is something that moves you, if there is some mission, some cause, some belief, then be brave and talk about it. Yeah, this kind of stuff can elevate your music EPK to a whole new level. If your why can be heard in your music, read in your bio, and seen in your artwork and photos, it creates a much stronger impact. And by the way, I have also done this why work for myself. Yeah, so I try to, in everything I do, I try to come from a perspective of why, the motivation behind what I'm doing here. Why am I even offering this free content here with Pick Yourself? Why am I even having a certain style of communication with my clients in my mixing and mastering studio? And I've put together a manifesto page. You can go to kopilko-productions.com/manifesto. That explains my motivation behind that. That explains my principles of working, the things I believe in, the things that drive me. Yeah. And doing this type of analysis for yourself and letting this influence your electronic press kit makes it much more powerful. If you just state the same facts, just like everybody else, if you talk only about the what in your artist career, yeah, that doesn't make you special. Yeah, you better hope that your music is extremely special, because otherwise, there will just be not enough interesting stuff to write about you. Alright then, the second aspect of a highly effective EPK is tell a story that is consistent across music, visuals, and text. So if your why is clear, you can move on and think about storytelling. So we as humans, we are constantly looking for stories, and if they're interesting enough, we will most likely share them with others. That's just an inherent drive that is in every human. I have no idea why that is. There are for sure evolutionary explanations for that, but stories are powerful. This is just a given. This is why many brands also use storytelling in their marketing as an authentic and engaging way to bring across a certain message. So storytelling simply means that you try to connect the interesting aspects of your why with happenings and milestones in your what. Okay, so you connect the why and the what. If your style of music is dark and atmospheric, and your mission is to bring aspects of contemporary classical music into techno, then maybe you can connect this with a certain event in your life that has led to that concept. Maybe there is a little story inside that. I mean, how did you come up with that? Yeah. So try to connect these interesting aspects. And keep in mind that consistency is really important here. So even if it's just on a subconscious level, your music, your video material, and your artist bio and your written content, all of that should tell the same consistent story. There shouldn't be some kind of strange gap between your photos and your artist bio, or your photos and your videos and so on, or the music and everything else. So make sure that this all feels on point. It feels like coming out of one core thought or one core story that is like the red thread in your material. And just one more thing on this. This is really important. Don't just make up a story or try to force it in a certain direction. This is completely wrong. This will backfire, I promise. If it's authentic and it feels right, then it's a really powerful lever you can pull. But don't try to fake it, because people will find that out. Journalists and bloggers will sniff this, and your fans, in the worst case, will also sniff it. And an EPK for musicians and DJs can only work its magic if it's more than some easy-to-dismiss marketing fluff. Okay, let's come to the third aspect of highly effective EPKs, and that is make it as convenient as possible for journalists and bloggers to find your material and to work with it. So just think about the limited resources that journalists and bloggers have these days. It doesn't matter if they do it just for passion, as a hobby, just a little blog, or if they do it as professional journalists. Honestly, they all have very, very limited resources in terms of time. And they hate it when people hide information, when people make it difficult to get to the point. And they love it when people prepare everything nicely for them. So if you're the person that prepares everything according to a professional standard, where it's easy to copy and paste parts, where it's easy to get photos in the right size and so on, then this just increases your chances to be featured in a desired way in a blog or magazine. They just don't want to scroll through your entire website just to find a link to your EPK at the very bottom. They don't want to write you an email just to get a high-resolution version of your photo. They will not do this. Or only if you're famous enough that there's no other way. But if you put together an EPK, then make sure to put yourself into the shoes of a journalist, of a blogger, and think about convenience. So what can you do to make it as convenient as possible for them to get to the good stuff? Now, what does that include? For example, you don't want to embed your text in a PDF, because when you copy and paste from a PDF, sometimes the whole formatting is pretty weird and it's just not a nice way of working with PDF. If instead you just host your bio text directly on that specific website that you created, or in a document that makes it easier to copy and paste compared to a PDF, well, of course, that is a more comfortable way of getting to the information. Then, you want to give them a short version of your bio, a long version of your bio. You want to give them your artist photos in different formats, in different sizes. Always make sure that you also have a very high resolution format, but also make sure that you have a web format, so they don't have to scale it down for web purposes. And I mean, all of these things, I will not give you specific recommendations now, because this is stuff you can just type into your search engine and will immediately get some image converter for web, for example, or stuff like that. So just do a little bit of research beforehand and then apply these processes, and you will for sure have a way more effective EPK compared to people who don't do this. Yeah, so think about convenience. This is one of the easiest but most powerful levers you can pull. All right, so these were the 3 points that help your EPK stand out. Now, I promised you in the beginning that we will talk also about some bonus ideas that you can add to your EPK to make it more interesting. Now, the purpose of this is to add an extra layer of depth. Yeah, so an extra layer of depth, of personality, just a look behind the scenes basically of who you are and how you work and so on. And I just came up with 2 ideas that make a lot of sense in my opinion, and you will for sure come up with your own ideas. Make sure to share them with me because I'm super curious of what you think can also help. And the first one is, I call it the self-interview. Yeah. If you don't have any press articles or interviews yet, you can of course record just a short podcast or a video with a self-interview. Yeah, and I don't mean you should ask yourself a question and then answer it. Of course, that would be stupid and look silly. But you could bring in some questions by your fans and followers, or you simply let another artist or producer buddy of your circle and in your genre interview you. So there are many attractive ways of doing this, and you can even use this as a way of interacting with your audience also. Yeah, so why not bring in some of your true fans, for example, and let them ask a couple of questions. And yes, this is staged, of course, so you know what the questions will be, more or less, and you will also have an influence on the questions, so you make sure that the right things get asked, the things that evoke interesting answers. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with that, since you don't pretend that this interview was done with a blog or magazine. Yeah, it's simply a powerful and clever and playful way to add more depth to your EPK. And then the second idea is a behind-the-scenes studio video. And this one, of course, requires a bit more work, but you could give people a sneak peek into your creative workflow by doing a little behind-the-scenes studio video. And this doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah, so sometimes a phone video, so Instagram story style, is enough. If you do it in a charming way, yeah, then this can definitely add a certain layer of depth. It makes it very, very personal, and it just gives a different impression compared to all the, highly formatted stuff that you have in your EPK overall. Now, you must, of course, make sure that this also fits your brand overall. You cannot really do this in a shitty way if everything else is super polished, and you can't do it super polished if everything else is a little bit more rough. But yeah, again, this is something that you can even do for your fans, spread it on social media and so on, and then simply reuse this content in your EPK, because I believe this really gives personality and character to your EPK. Okay, so these were my 2 ideas, and I think you can come up with way more. Just go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/community and post your ideas into the thread for this episode. I think we all would benefit from a couple more of these ideas. And now before we end this episode, I have put together a little FAQ on creating an electronic press kit, because people have been asking the same questions over and over again. And let me just quickly address the most relevant ones. So the first one is, do I need an EPK even if I'm just starting out? Well, not really. I think you need it as soon as you put out your first release. Yeah, even if that's not a label release, but when you put out your first release, you want to give journalists and bloggers at least a first impression of what your artist brand is about. You don't have a huge story to tell, you don't have huge milestones, but you have a first version of your EPK that you can then expand on. Second one is, do I need to include video content? I think it's definitely helpful because it is very personal and it gives an audio-visual perception of who you are, but you don't have to if you don't have any. Yeah, it's still worth publishing your EPK even without video content. Now, how often should I update my electronic press kit? I personally recommend you update it every 6 months, and if you can do it every quarter, then it's even better. So I think the more advanced you get, the more often you have to update your EPK. Next question, what file format should I use? Well, I believe it really doesn't matter. Just make sure that the text is easy to copy and paste, and your music should be hosted via a streamable service. So Spotify playlist, SoundCloud, or something similar. That is completely fine. And with photo content, yeah, of course, you don't want to use a super obscure format. So usually JPEGs are fine for photos. But yeah, don't make it overly complicated. Just think about convenience. As I've told you before, this is the most important thing. Now, coming to photography, how professional do my photos have to be? Well, first and foremost, I think your photos should reflect your artist brand in the truest sense. This is the most important thing. And quality matters, of course, but a very talented friend of yours with a decent camera and some editing skills can also do it. Yeah, so this is fine in the beginning. Later on, it makes more sense to also invest in great photography. But also here, it's really important to develop a relationship with a photographer in your niche that understands what the scene is like, that understands what you're going for, that takes the time to analyze your artist brand together with you and see like what type of photo you should actually make. It just doesn't make sense to pay any high-class photographer which probably doesn't have an idea of what your genre of music is about. Okay, last question. Should I invest money into creating an awesome EPK? Well, if you really struggle with certain aspects, like for example your artist bio, if you're just notoriously bad at writing your own artist bio and you always feel strange, then consider hiring a professional. Of course, makes sense. If you don't have a talented friend for photography, of course it's better to hire a professional photographer. But I still believe that you can do this DIY style in most cases, yeah, especially for your first draft of the EPK. And you can later on build on that. You can evolve with your EPK. It doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. And by the way, if you need any help with your artist brand or also with your music production stuff, then you can hit me up for one-on-one coaching. I am opening up a couple of spots again. Yeah, I only do a very limited amount of coaching slots every month or every quarter. And right now I'm opening up a few spots again. So just go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/coaching if that's interesting to you. And yeah, we'll get in touch and take it from there. Okay, let's see now how you can put this episode into action. Okay, let's implement this. How can you create an awesome EPK that truly stands out? I'm giving you 3 action steps which you can implement right away to get started with your electronic press kit. So the first one is schedule time to create or update your EPK. And this is really important because doing this just on the side is not easy. Putting together a great EPK takes some time, and depending on how much of the individual parts you already have in place, I advise you to set aside at least 2 to 3 days to put this together nicely. And some of the bonus material that I've mentioned might take longer than that, but you can start with the first draft of the most important things and publish this sooner, and then later on update your EPK and bring in those extra bonus materials. In case you already have an EPK and you just have to update some things because you found like interesting perspectives in this episode, then just set aside 2 to 3 hours. I think that should be enough then. Then step number 2, start with a minimum viable product, MVP. So a minimum viable product is something that is good enough to put out. Yeah. So remember, done is better than perfect. You shouldn't aim for a completely flawless, meticulously designed EPK. That's good to have at some point, but it's better to have something available with your upcoming release instead of waiting for the perfect version of it later on. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, then it's make sure to nail the why in your storyline. This is really important. This is the one thing that truly makes a difference and helps you stand out from all the rest. Then action step number 3 is expand and update every 6 months. So if you work hard on building a meaningful music career, you will soon see a lot of progress. So that naturally results in an outdated EPK, of course, which is the last thing you want. Imagine some influential blogger writing about you with facts and figures from last year. Well, that's a bummer. So make sure your EPK stays up to date at least every 6 months. It's even better to do it quarterly. But yeah, aside from that, you should also try to expand on it. You should try to enrich it with extra content. Try to take it to the next level by including creative bonus content, which I've mentioned above, some ideas. And it's even better if they can't be found anywhere else. So if there's something that only the journalists and bloggers who land on your press material, on your press kit find, then that is perfect because you give them the opportunity to impress with details that can't be found anywhere else. All right, that is it for this week's episode. Now, I would love to hear from you. What creative ideas do you have to make your EPK stand out? If there is something you want to add to my list, I would be super thankful, and I can even include that in the blog post for this episode. So reach out. You can write me an email, philip@copilco-productions.com, or you simply join our Facebook community and leave a comment under the post for this episode. Just go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/community. It will forward you to this private Facebook group. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you there. I look forward to having some personal exchange with you. And as always, I hope to see you again next week for another episode. Bye-bye. If you don't want to miss any of the upcoming episodes, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And you can find detailed blog posts for every single episode on pickyourselfpodcast.com. Until then, see you next time.